Hello and welcome back. This is the texturing portion of my 3D code overview, and we have here our baked mesh that we got from the last video from the retopo room. And the first thing you normally want to do before you start texturing is just have a quick look around your mesh to see if there's any issues that you got from the bake and whether or not it's worth trying to do a rebake or just fixing it with the texture. And this bake actually came out pretty nice. We do have some issues here on the frosting, especially there, and I've noticed that some of my beads as well didn't really come out, and I don't think it's worth going back to the bake to do this, so we'll just fix it up with the texture. And what we can do here is actually just come over to our paint objects window, and if you don't have this window, it's in the Windows pop-ups paint objects, and I'm just going to alt click on this frosting layer here. It works the exact same as Photoshop layers. So we can see here that this is an issue with our normal map, and it is also an issue with the color on our frosting layer. And so for starters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my view mode to flat shade by either going here or by hitting the 2 key. So now you might have noticed, like, there's no more reflections or anything, because flat shade mode, there's no lighting, which is very handy for texturing. So making sure I'm on the right layer, I'm going to hit the V key, which essentially is just the shortcut for eyedropper. And now, if you notice up here, I now have this base color, so I want to make sure my opacity is at 100%, and I don't want to be painting any gloss, I just want to be painting color, so I'll enable that. And I'm just going to come around and fix up these little issues. And I think actually one of these gray spots is not a metal bead, it was actually, yeah, okay, so this one right here, that shouldn't be there. So fortunately, the bake issues for me were pretty limited. You might have a lot more. I've often in the past had some pretty horrendous issues that just couldn't really fix with a rebake, and so it helps to kind of know what each of these layers does and where to sort of identify problems, if it's a normal map issue, if it's color, or if it's spec. I mean, it will be one of those three, so it's not like it's impossible to not fix, but it's best to fix it now before you start baking out your occlusion or your curvature. So I'm going to come along here and I'll bring back my normal map, but you'll notice that it's not displaying because I'm still in flat shade mode, so I'll hit the 5 key, and now I can see everything again. And so before I fix these beads, I will just go in here and fix these up a little bit. So I'll come to my normal map layer, and because this is a baked normal map, I don't need to be using the depth thing here. I'm not sure what you call these. The thing that allows us to paint depth, we don't actually need to enable it in order to modify this normal map layer, which some people find confusing, and I agree. But once you understand that you can paint depth on any layer, even in a standard blend, it kind of begins to make a little bit more sense as to why this system exists. But either way, we have a couple of little issues, so I'm just going to hold the shift key on the normal map and my color selected, and do something like that, smooth it out a little bit, and then the same for these. So it's not the best result, but it's less obvious than what it was. And because this area of my frosting is pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things, it largely won't ever be seen. I don't need to go too crazy with the cleanup, which is always handy. Oh, I missed a spot of color here, so I'll go back here, my frosting layer, and I'll just paint that in. Now there were some beads that were missing. Yeah, so these 3 here we can fix. Oh, there's actually missed a little bit again. Make sure I'm in the right layer. Normal map, 5. I could, if I wanted to, just try and draw something in the normal map layer, but I don't think that works. Sorry, I realize that's not the best thing to hear from someone that's trying to teach you, but as I said before, this is a baked normal map. It's not really the same as any of these others, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to smooth out the normals of these ones that have been baked because I want to paint in my own, and I don't want it to conflict with what's there. So I'll just smooth these out. And then what I can do now is I can paint both normals and color, and I'll select like a gray color, or if I want it to be exact, go into flat shade, grab that color, come back out. And in my beads special layer, because I know that this is where all of this stuff is anyway, I might as well paint both the depth and the normal. And the strength of your brush determines the depth in this case. It's the same as sculpting, like the higher your depth, the stronger you'll either sculpt in or out of the mesh. So I'll see if this is enough. Could be, but I do need to bump up my metalness. Looks a little weak to me. Maybe something like that. I don't think it's quite as good as the bake, but it's passable. And there was one up here, wasn't there? Okay, that'll do. So with our normals fixed and the color down here fixed, it's time to start doing some occlusion and curvature bakes. And so we'll do that by just going up here to textures, and we will calculate occlusion first. It doesn't actually matter, but we'll do that. I tend to leave these as they are. The only thing I will ever change is whether or not it's a hemisphere or sphere and a hemisphere. You pretty much always want to put it into a new layer unless you know exactly what you're doing and you're on a layer where you want it to go in, but we'll just leave those as is. So that's our ambient occlusion layer. It's a pretty nice result. I find with anything, whether it be XNormal or any other sort of 3D software that you bake an ambient occlusion from, it's usually always too dark. Like if you can imagine this cupcake sat on your kitchen counter, you wouldn't get these hard shadows under here, and like this area wouldn't be so dark. Certainly wouldn't be lit in this triangular fashion. So I tend to tidy up my ambient occlusion a fair bit, and I'll do a little bit of that right now. The first thing I do, absolute first thing, is I drop the opacity down, and 35 or so seems to work. And so now some of my initial worries have kind of already disappeared. That this area here is okay. I still might want to smooth out some of this. So ensuring I have color enabled, that I'm on the ambient occlusion layer, just hold shift and kind of smooth out some of that. I'll undo that actually, because I just realized the textures of this cake portion is not symmetrical, but the mesh is, so we can still paint symmetrically. So I will use symmetry to save us some precious seconds. I mean, I know how it is when you sat through video tutorials and they're just going over the most basic mundane stuff, and you have to set the speed to 2 times and you're skipping ahead, and I'm sure many of you will do that to me, and that's fine. I don't hold any grudges. So I'll come out of symmetry for that, and this area, it largely got fixed a bit. We still have some issues on the frosting, but I'm kind of okay with it actually. As a comparison, if you can imagine this ambient occlusion being back to 100%, you see what I mean? Like, that's just way too dark. I never like it when artists don't reduce the ambient occlusion. Though, I mean, of course, there will be times where it might suit a particular style that they're going for, but for the most part, especially in a lot of realism pieces that you see nowadays, nobody really seems to tweak the ambient occlusion, and you really should. You really should. So after that's done, we'll come along and we'll do our curvature map. Now, 3D Coat uses a curvature map for their smart materials, but myself and I'm sure a lot of other texture artists, they actually use this map just to boost their texturing a bit, and that we'll get some highlights on the edges and some lowlights in crevices, similar to sort of ambient occlusion, but it's more to do with the convex or concave nature of a mesh. This map is probably called other things in different softwares. So if you're unfamiliar with it, maybe when you see it, it might trigger some memory. And it's hidden by default because you're not really supposed to use it. As I said, it's mostly just used as a masking tool for your smart materials. But this is what it looks like, and oftentimes it's really an aid for texturing, especially for this frosting area for me. It's kind of exactly what I would have painted anyway. So I tend to keep this, but I will tidy it up a little bit, especially on the cupcake area here. Looks like there's some pretty weird things going on, but I'll come into flat shade mode. Oh, it's also worth noting, you might be wondering why the cupcake is darker than, sorry, the cupcake holder is darker than the frosting and the cake itself. I don't know if this is yet another 3D coat bug, but when you have overlaid UVs, if you remember, all of our cupcake holder is in quarters. When you have that, it seems to just get darker. So this is the shade you get with unique mapping, and this is the shade you get with 2 times mirroring. I don't know why, but either way, it's completely fine, for my needs at least. So I'm going to hit V to grab this color closest to there, and I'm going to enable radial symmetry here because I know that my cupcake holder has 32 points. And making sure I'm on color, I'm just gonna, symmetry isn't enabled, is it? There we go. Okay, that should be fine. And again, I tend to drop the opacity of this down, and I will also switch its mode to an overlay, if it will let me. Overlay. Okay, it's pretty good. Bearing in mind right now we are looking at this in the flat lit mode. So there's no normal map, there's no lighting, and it's a nice result, personally. I think so. So the only thing to do now, so I say the only thing, there's a few more things, but the main thing we need to do now is sort out our base colors. And you don't really need my advice on this, because obviously whatever you're doing is, I mean, unless you're following along and trying to get the exact same cupcake, chances are you're going to be making something completely different. So I'm going to speed through this, because all I'm going to do is put down some flat colors on the objects. The only thing worth noting before I speed up the video and you can't hear me speak anymore is I will probably be hiding layers as I'm doing this, just in case you were wondering what's going on. But before I I do that, it's worth noting, and this is a feature that some people love, some people hate. Personally, I think it's amazing. I'm on the frosting layer now, but that's redundant information. I shouldn't have mentioned that. But if I were to start painting here, and you see as I'm coming down closer and closer to the end of the frosting, it's not painting on the cake underneath. Even if I were to scale this brush way up and do this, it's not painting on the mesh underneath. And that's because it, by default, I'm not sure if it's an option that you can change. I don't want to change it if it is, but by default, you paint on individual elements unless your cursor goes over and basically hits that other element. So if I were to draw a line down here, oh, okay, that was a really bad example. Because I'm on the frosting layer, which is it's underneath our base and our cake. So, okay, I apologize. Okay, now, as you can see, if I were to do this, it paints through, whereas that does not. So it won't paint through until that middle cursor hits it, which I think is amazing. Actually, I tell a bit of a lie. You can, if you want, use the fill tool, and it has an object selection. So you can, if you want, just do that, and it will only fill the frosting object on the layer that you're on. Also, you might have noticed the preview window, for some reason it's always in lit, which I'm not a fan of. I would prefer it if it respected the mode that I was in, but either way, it is what it is. So you can do that if you want. So anyway, I'm going to continue just laying down my colors. I'll be back in a moment. That's that done. As I said, just 3 flat colors. I'll come back into lit mode here and just have a look around. I didn't do any color on the cake because I actually think that the color of the sculpt material that we used, either the bake or the default, I forget which one it uses by default, probably the default, thinking about it, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's an okay base color, so I'll probably keep that. One thing that I will show you is the stencils. I want to modify either the normals or the roughness. I'm undecided right now. I'll hopefully work it out in the next 15 seconds. But I want to modify something on the frosting here, and I want it to be sort of a dotty based effect. Probably nothing like that. Not like that. It's worth showing you though while I'm here. You can obviously just paint from camera. It also has other options like the cube mapping, where you can't see the preview anymore, but if you use the magnifying glass and click and drag it, then you can see how it's affecting the mesh. I'll probably go with from camera, something like that maybe. I'm not sure how easy that is to see on screen. And I'll bring this view, or the visibility percentage down a bit, because I would rather see more of this than the image itself. And I think I will go with normals for this, and just gonna come along and add in just some bits. Don't know if you can see that too well. I want it to be quite subtle, so I'm just gonna go around doing some soft strokes. And that should be fine. And to be fair, I'll probably do the same thing on the cake, but the invert. So either I can invert the stencil here and then just draw normally, or again just hold the control key and it will do it inwards. I don't know how obvious that is to see, but yeah. Oh, in fact, I might put a couple of inwards here, just a random scatter, a couple seconds. Okay, that's fine. So we'll move now onto I suppose I could show you something pretty cool. We won't color the sprinkles in this one, only because it's basically just a lot of wasted time. It's flat color. But I will show you how I would go about that, and it's using Photoshop. 3D Coat has a bridge to it. You can probably hook it up to other things, maybe. It says you can edit the current protection in Photoshop layers. So I'm not sure if, was it like GIMP or something like that? I've probably just made a fool of myself if it's not called that, and I'm just saying the word GIMP in a tutorial, but you can probably import it to that as well. And the way that you do that is either by going to Edit, and I think it's this one, Edit All Layers in External Editor. There is also a projection, which is pretty cool, and if I have time, I will show you that. But for now, I'm going to use this one, and it's Control P, the shortcut. So I'll just hit that, Photoshop will open, and we will start doing some magic stuff. So I'll be back in a second. So it's just brought in our layered PSD file, and I'm just going to hide the normal ambient and curvature for now, just to make it easier to work with. But all I'm going to do basically is I'm just going to hold Control and click on my sprinkles layer, so it makes a selection of my sprinkles. And then I'm just going to come up to the frosting layer and hit delete. So now my sprinkles can be seen from underneath, which is pretty cool. So now I'll just re-enable those. I'll hit save, close this, and then go back to 3D Coat. And there you go, like almost immediately it pops up. And because my sprinkle layer is underneath my frosting layer, and again I said we're not going to be texturing these things right now just because it's a bit fiddly. Make sure I'm in color, sprinkles layer, opacity 100. I can just do this, and it doesn't matter where else I draw because this layer is underneath and it's just the frosting has been removed from it. So that is how I would do my sprinkles, and I just change my color and do them all. But I will leave that for off camera. So the last thing I really want to just cover, I suppose, you might have noticed I'm not really talking about any of these tools. I don't use a lot of them, to be honest. I mean, if you're doing sort of hand painted textures, the only thing you care about is a brush and an eraser. But it is sort of handy to know what a lot of these things are. I have used them in the past, and I will do a video that sort of best suits examples for these. But I don't think this is the one. I can show you what they do, but honestly the effect wouldn't be worth it because this isn't the right time to do that. It's not the right example. But the one thing that I will just start doing here, also, did I make that layer? Get rid of that. I will just start laying down some I guess just some overlay color. Well, sorry, not color, it will be black and white, but overlay. And like this. And I can't remember if this is a default or not, but I've set my color swap to the X key, which is like Photoshop, but I don't know if I've done that or if it was like that when I installed it. So if you, sorry, it's really close to that other window, so it's a bit annoying. If you hover over anything in 3D Coat, almost anything at least, it will allow you to create a hotkey by just hitting the backspace key. So if yours isn't an X and you want it to be an X, then that's how you do it. So I'm just going to come along here anyway, and I want to lay down, I do not want to be doing that. I want to lay down just some broad strokes. Essentially the way that I kind of texture anything is the same way that I sculpt almost anything, is you start with large forms and then just keep sort of adding in detail. The most sort of simplistic way to explain that is basically I start with a big brush, a big soft brush, and then I end up going sort of smaller and harder. That sounds weird. You can kind of get the idea as I'm kind of laying these down. you can see a form starting to develop. And so if I were to keep doing this and going smaller and adding in sort of very finite highlights, as it were, then you would get some nice results. And that's kind of how I would handle anything. So I'll just wrong color. That's way too strong. Probably going to leave it at that. To be honest, I mean, I'm not the greatest texture artist in the world anyway, and I'm probably an even worse tutor, considering I can't even be bothered to do these sprinkles. But the point of these lessons is to just show you how I would do things and why that might be better than other ways. Like, rather than coming along and having a layer and trying to sort of paint all of these sprinkles whilst accidentally painting over the frosting, it's handy to know little sort of tricks as to how to get things like that. So that, yeah, I think that will wrap it up. I mean, chances are as soon as I stop recording, I'll think of something massive that I missed, but that's life. So for now, this is the texturing done. I will do an additional video at some point this week where we're just going to export this stuff into Unity, because there seems to be a lot of problems where people have normal maps that aren't displaying correctly. So it should be just a quick video to run through essentially the same settings that I have. So if you use this and you use Unity and you have problems with the things that I just talked about, then stick around and I will see you in the next one.